All right, 0.5 angles of parallel lines cut by a transversal. So here's your parallel lines. Here's a transversal. So a transversal is just a line that cuts through two lines, really. They don't have to be parallel, but we're specifically talking about two lines that are parallel here. When you have a transversal of parallel lines like we do here, you get certain relationships in these angles. So I went and numbered all the angles here. And a lot of the problems you'll see the angles numbered. And we get these certain relationships that can be represented. So I want to go through what each of these are. So the first one here is actually a typo. It says consecutive, but that's not right. The word that we actually want to go there is corresponding. Corresponding. So cross off consecutive and put corresponding. And what that means is that they're in the same corner. So if you see the example they give you is 1 and 5, those are in the same corner, okay? I'm gonna go through all of these and then I want you to try and find the other example on your own. So corresponding means the same corner. 1 and 5 is an example of that. Let's go on to the next one. The next one is alternate interior angles. And that name should be pretty self-explanatory. Alternate meaning that they're on alternate sides of this transversal. Interior meaning that they're inside these two lines. So the example they give you is 3 and 6. You could see they're on alternate sides of the line and they're both inside these two lines. So see if you could find another pair like that. The next one is same side interior angles. And another word for this is consecutive. That's there twice that's a mistake, is that this is really consecutive. So this one has two names, same side interior or consecutive. I like same side interior because it just makes sense. They're on the same side as the transversal, they're inside. So the example I'm giving you here is 3 and 5. You should be able to quickly tell what is the other pair that's same side interior or consecutive. Next up we have alternate exterior angles. Alternate exterior, so again, alternate sides of the transversal, but now they're on the outside of these parallel lines. So the example I gave you is 1 and 8. See how they're on alternate sides of this line, but they're outside that line. That's alternate exterior. And vertical. Vertical is the one that's you'll see the most, or spend the most time with. These are angles that are across from each other in intersection. So see 1 and 4, how they're across from each other. That's vertical angles. So you should be able to find another example that are across from each other like that, across an intersection. And they have to share the same lines. See how this line is in common with both 1 and 4, and this is also in common with 1 and 4. They have to share those same lines. Okay, I want you to go through and see if you can list off another example. Pause the video, and I'll go through and list off all the ones that are also examples. Okay, so hopefully you got at least one of each of these pairs. For corresponding, remember they just have to be in the same corner, so 2 and 6 are in the same corner, 3 and 7 are both in the bottom left, 4 and 8 are both in the bottom right. For alternate interior, if we have 3 and 6 already, then 4 and 5 would be the other alternate interior angle pair. For same side interior, see 3 and 5 are on the same side, 4 and 6 are also on the same side, but inside the parallel lines. For alternate exterior, we have 1 and 8, 2 and 7 are also alternate exterior. And for vertical, we could do 1 and 4, 2 and 3, 5 and 8, and 6 and 7. So those are all the different pairs that we know of, all the different names. Okay, all the above angle relationships are either congruent, okay, they're either all going to be congruent, and the symbol for congruent is an equal sign with a squiggly line above. So they're all either congruent, which means they're exactly the same, or they're supplementary. And this is a word we're going to use a lot. Supplementary means that they add up to 180 degrees. If you remember, 180-degree lines are straight lines, right? So when I think of supplementary, I think of the word straight or straight line. And straight starts with S, supplementary starts with S. Easy way to remember it. Something else you could kind of do to tell which ones are congruent, which ones are supplementary, is just get out your highlighter, and basically you're going to highlight every other. So basically all the verticals are going to be congruent. Oops. And all of the corresponding, so like 1 and 9 are corresponding, 1 and 3 are corresponding, 3 and 11 are corresponding, and then all their verticals. Oops. And that basically means that all of those are congruent. Then you just highlight all the other ones with a different color. And so all the yellows are congruent to each other and supplementary. So if they're both colors, it's supplementary. And if it's the same color, then they're congruent. And that's just kind of a quick, easy way to tell which ones are congruent and supplementary. And you'll learn about which angle pairs are congruent, which ones are supplementary. But if you could just visualize it, I think it's a lot easier. All right, let's go to the next page. There's also something called complementary angles. And these are angles that add up to 90 degrees. And so if you think about a 90-degree angle, it makes a corner. And again, so this is how I remember this one. C for complementary. Complementary makes corner. So supplementary, complementary. S and C. S for straight, C for corners. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to use these angles and use the picture on the previous page to determine what's the name of the relationship and whether they're congruent or supplementary. So you need to look back on the page before this to figure it out, and that's okay. And then just put your answers here. I'm gonna do the first one with you guys. And if you look at 9-11 on the previous page, you'll see that they're in the same corner, and so we call that corresponding. Corresponding are in the same corner, and corresponding are always gonna be congruent. And what I write here is these are always going to be the case. So for example, corresponding angles will always be congruent. And then what we write here and here, they're going to be rules that'll always be true. Okay, so I want you to try the next three on your own, see if you could figure it out, and then check back in a little bit to see if you did it right. Okay, so we did this one together. 4 and 15 were alternate exterior, and alternate exterior are always congruent. 6 and 7 were same side interior or consecutive, and same side interior are always supplementary. 12 and 15 were vertical, and vertical are always congruent. And the only pair we didn't talk about is alternate interior, and alternate interior also are always congruent. So basically, all the ones we learned about are always congruent. The only one that's not is same side supplementary. It's the only one that's supplementary. The rest are, all the pairs are always going to be congruent. So that makes it kind of easy to remember which is which. Just know that same side interior, which has a bunch of S's in it, is supplementary. They make straight lines. Okay, because we know these rules, we can use them to solve other problems. So like below here, it says solve for X. And at first glance, you might be like, I don't know how to do that. But look, they're across from each other. So they're what we call vertical. Vertical are always congruent. So that means these two things are equal. And kind of how we mark things as congruent is we put these little like arc symbols in there. And so we could say, well, if they're congruent, then they must be equal. So we could say, oh, sorry, that's a 2x. 5x equals 2x plus 24. So then we would subtract 2x from both sides, and we get 3x equals 24. Divide both sides by 3. And so x equals 8. Boom, we just solved for x, no problem. Because they're congruent, so we could set them equal. Easy. The next one, there's not anything about it that's congruent or supplementary, but it does tell us that this entire angle, ABC, is 145. So the way that I kind of want you to think about this, I want you to think about this as two things have to make up the third. So there's an actual rule for this. It's called the angle addition postulate, and it may seem like overly simple. But all we're saying is, hey, angle ABD plus angle DBC, right? ABD and DBC, don't together, they add up to equal ABC. So you just write equals angle ABC. Now you're just going to fill in all the parts that you know. So, for example, that one is the red one. I'm going to say, so ABD is the red one. So we're just going to put a 2x plus 10 there. And then I'll say that this is the green one. And that looks like a 4x minus 3. And then the blue one is the big one, which we'll just leave blue, and that's ABC, which they tell me is 145 degrees. Okay, well, if I was to just kind of work this out now, that's a 2x plus 10 there. So 2x plus 10 plus 4x minus 3. Well, 2x plus 4x that makes 6x, and 10 minus 3, that makes positive 7, equals 145. We'll leave it in blue. Well, now we could start doing some basic algebra, right? Like I could subtract 7. I get 6x equals 145 minus 7 is 138. And then I could divide both sides by 6. And I don't know that off the top of my head. But if you put it in a calculator, you'll get that x equals 138 divided by 6 is 23. And there you go. We just figured out what x is. Now, this was not about congruent or supplementary, because in this one, they told me what the whole thing added up to. And so I just thought of it as, hey, this angle plus this angle equals the whole thing. Make a little equation out of it and solve. And you'll find that in geometry, that's often what you're doing. You're using something you know to be true from the picture, writing an equation about it, and then solving that equation. All right. Let's take a look at example 3 now. It says 2 lines are cut by the transversal are parallel. So they're telling us that these 2 lines are parallel. And if you wanted to, you can mark that they're parallel with these little, like putting little arrows on the line like that. That means that the lines are parallel. They want you to find the value of B. Well, in order to find the value of B, you have to know the relationship of these. So I want you to think if you know the relationship. And this actually doesn't have a name that we've come up with if you think about it. So here's the transversal. They're on the same side as the transversal, but they're not on the inside. So I guess you could call this same side exterior, but that's not really one that we came up with. Or that we learned. So let's just use our highlighter tool, like, right? If I was to say, okay, green and green, these things match because they're vertical. And then these are corresponding, right? Like these 2 angles here are corresponding, so they're both the same. And then these are vertical. So there's all the green must be congruent. And if I went through and highlighted all the other ones, these must be supplementary to the green. Well, hey, we just found out they're supplementary. So I want you to think about that. If they're supplementary, we know they add up to 180. So I want you to write an equation and solve that equation for B, since we now know that they're supplementary. I'm gonna let you try that on your own and then check back to see if you did it correctly. Okay, so remember, supplementary means that they add up to 180. So you can just simply write this equation that the green angle plus the yellow angle equals 180. Then just solve that equation. You end up with B equals 35. And that's all there is to it. All right, lastly, what I want you guys to do is list all the angle relationships that you learned and put them in a list here. So you're going to either write the angle relationships that you learned, and if they're congruent, I want you to put it on the congruent side. If they're supplementary, put them on the supplementary side. And you got a list on the first page of notes that you could just look at and just put all the ones that are congruent here and all the ones that are supplementary here. That's all there is to it. I'll see you guys on the next video.